may think that this train is like any other, but it's one of the most deadliest weapons ever made. Carrying 3 ICBMs armed with 10 warheads each, this train alone could destroy the whole east or west coast in one go. And you have no idea where it is on the entire Soviet rail network. Why the Soviets built such a weapon and what was the story behind it is what we'll be talking about today, exploring the RT-23 Молодец missile, or known as the nuclear ghost train. In the 1960s, American high-altitude espionage missions had revealed the existence and precise locations of Soviet nuclear missiles. And this was a huge problem. With the missile silo locations being well known to the Americans, in the case of a first strike, there was a slim chance that they could destroy most, if not all, of the Soviet nukes before launch. With the Soviets surrounded by the US Navy, US bases, and its allies, a first strike by the Americans would almost utterly eliminate the USSR's nuclear arsenal, and in turn, any bargaining power that it might have had as a superpower. But Moscow did have one card yet to play: the sweeping, huge territory of the entire Union. If there was a way to have a mobile platform to launch nuclear weapons, it would be like searching for a needle in a haystack for the Americans. This would eliminate their biggest threat and put the scales back in balance. And that's exactly what happened in the 1980s. Choo-choo, because we're all getting on board the end of the world train. This rail project by the Russians was always designed to be kept top secret and have no one know about it. This is the complete opposite of what you would need to do to be successful. The sinister part about this train is that it would look like any other normal train. In total, there would be 17 rail cars that would comprise the combat rail-based missile complex when officially translated from Russian. The railcar composition would be as follows: 3 modified M62 locomotives, 3 launch wagons with 2 support ones each in a total of 9 rail cars, 1 diesel and lubricant wagon, and 4 rail cars to accommodate the crew. All these rail cars would be masked as either passenger or refrigerator cars, having this train look like any other normal civilian train. Just imagine trying to hunt down these trains. You would have to target almost any civil train in the whole USSR, and still not one guarantee that you would actually destroy the right one. The train would be able to cruise at an average 80 to 120 kilometers per hour, and the idea would be that it could move at least 1,000 kilometers per day in case of combat deployment. The train was also equipped to be able to short-circuit the power lines above and use this electricity if needed. Due to the size of the train and the supplies, it would be able to operate autonomously for up to 28 days, meaning that even if the command was lost, this train could still launch the missiles and assure mutual destruction in a nuclear war. This is some serious Metro 2033 vibes. At any time, at any place, the missiles could be launched in just 3 minutes from the moment they got a command from Moscow. This idea is actually very similar to the American idea of launching nuclear missiles from 747s in flight. The ingenious part about the Soviet missile train was not only that the train itself, but a new way of launching nuclear rockets. The Soviet nuclear launching train program began not with the trains themselves, but with a new way to launch the rockets. The Soviets were the first in the world to develop what was known as a cold launch rocket technology, which is radically different from the typical hot rocket launch that we know and love today. The difference between the cold and hot launch is that the main rocket engine is ignited immediately with the hot launch, hence the name, and with the cold launch, compressed gas is used to launch the rockets from the silo, or the container in this case, and then only then is the main engine ignited. Before the main engine, course correction boosters are also activated to make sure the rocket stays on course. The advantage of this system allows for much safer launches from the ship, submarine or missile silo, and allows for reusing this silo after launch with almost no repairs. Nowadays, almost all ICBMs are cold launched, and some AA systems, like the Russian Tor, work on the same principle. The technology allows for launching an ICBM from, well, pretty much anywhere, and anywhere is exactly the advantage that the Soviets had. With the know-how and the plan in place, what happened next? The SDI, or Strategic Defense Initiative, also sometimes called the famous Star Wars program, was a program under Reagan to make the Soviet nuclear arms obsolete and give advantage to the US again, because in his words, mutually assured destruction was a suicide pact. The Soviet answered with two large projects of their own, Topol and Maladets, to move the nukes around the country and hide them from the American weapons. After all, you can't shoot down what you can't see. While the Tupol-M is one of the best well-known missile platforms, it's actually the RT-23 that was developed into 3 variants, including the railway base that we're talking today. The other 2 versions were a silo-based version and a wheeled vehicle-based version, which was the MAZ-7907, but this idea was abandoned because of the complexity and costs, and also the fact that it couldn't fulfill all of the requirements set, so instead the engineers went for the other 2 variants to make sure they could come into service as quickly as possible. The missiles itself were to be developed by the legendary Yuzhnoye Bureau, which is now located in today's Ukraine. This is the same bureau behind the Zenit rockets and a couple other ICBMs, so they certainly had the competency for the task given. It's interesting to mention that they also requested additional funds to further develop the RT-23 into a carrier rocket for space-bound missions, but the request was denied, which is a huge shame because you can imagine a secret train launching rockets into space was entirely within our reality. But it seems for the Russians that it was all about the firepower. The trains of death entered service in the late 80s, with further ground-based silos being built, mostly in Ukraine. The lifespan of the missiles was around 15 years, and after the dissolution of the USSR, this was one of the first weapons to be included in the START treaties. All the silos in Ukraine were destroyed, and under the program, the RT-23 trains wouldn't be allowed to enter the railway network in peace times. By 2003, the Russians started to decommission the trains because of the missile's guaranteed lifespan was expiring, and by 2005 it was officially announced that the missile complex was officially retired. The Russians, however, started developing a new nuclear missile train called the Barguzin, which would feature the new Yas missile, being the main weapon of choice, but the project was frozen in 2017 due to a lack of funding. Or perhaps that's what they want us to think. And of course, don't think that I've forgotten that Uncle Sam also planned this trick up his sleeve. In the early 90s, Project Peacekeeper Rail Garrison was started to create the exact same nuclear missile program, just like the Russians, but the project was abandoned shortly afterwards. Or perhaps that's exactly what they want us to think. I hope you enjoyed this video, and do let me know if you'd like to see me cover the US attempt at this idea.
Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.